So, in today's revision session, oh my god, session, we are going to do the Companies Act. And as you know, once this is done, after this, we will also be having the writing sessions also. So, first of all, I hope your studies are going great. And this video is helpful for those students who are appearing for Jan as well as May exams also. Important tips in between will be given for the exams also, for the Jan, for the May exams. And also, if this video helps you, do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We keep posting all such videos from time to time. So coming with Companies Act 2013. The act came into force on 2013, applies to the whole of India. Now, when we talk about Companies Act obviously talks about company, right? It talks about company. So, what do I mean by a company? A company means a company which is incorporated under this act or any other previous company law. So, from this definition, what is very evident is that to become a company, you need to be incorporated. That means you have to follow the procedure given under the act. And once that is done, then you become a company, either under the Companies Act 2013 or under any other previous act, 1956, 1913, whatever. So when we talk about a company, what are the characteristics of a company? I repeat again, when we talk about a company, what are the characteristics of a company? Just one second. So, when we talk about a company, what are the characteristics of a company? First and foremost, the moment a company is incorporated, a separate person comes into existence. This separate person has an existence which is separate from its members, right? I hope the voice is fine. Please do give me a yes. Please do give me a yes if the voice is audible and if it's fine. So when we talk about a company is an artificial person. Matlab kya? The moment a company is incorporated, company, a separate person, that is the company, comes into existence. A separate person, the company, comes into existence, and this company and the members, okay, this company and the members are separate. That means company and members is not the same. The moment I tell Reliance Industries Limited, no one really thinks about Reliance Industries or the logo. Everyone first and foremost thinks about what? We'll think about what? Ambani. But Ambani and Reliance is not the same. So the moment a company is incorporated, an artificial person comes into existence. This person is separate from the members. That means company and members are not the same. That means if the company does something, members have no personal liability. Vice versa, if the members do something, the company has no personal liability. Then the next is members may come, members may go, company will continue. That means what? The company is incorporated by a legal process called incorporation. It can only die by a legal process called winding up. Death of a member is not the death of the company, right? Death of a member is not the death of the company. If I want to kill the company, I mean, if I want the company to be wound up, it can only be done by the legal process of winding up. Then the liability of a member is limited. I don't have unlimited liability. In case of partnership, the liability is unlimited. Here, the liability is limited. I am only liable for the unpaid value of the shares that I'm holding. And in case of a guarantee company, for the amount of guarantee I have given. Beyond that, I have no liability at all. If I want to sue the company, let's say I want to sue Reliance Industries Limited. Can I sue Reliance Industries Limited in its own name? Yes. I don't need the name of Ambani to file a case against Reliance Industries Limited. I can file a case just in the name of the company itself. So a company has a capacity to sue and be sued. The property of the company has, like in partnership, what happens? The property of the partnership belongs to the partners. But in case of company, company's property does not belong to the members. Company's property belongs wholly and solely to the company itself, and the member has no right over this property whatsoever. If you remember the interesting case of Makora versus Northern Assurance Limited, M had started a furniture company. Timber is very prone to damage, so he took an insurance. But he did not take the insurance in the name of the company, he took the insurance in his personal name. The timber is burned down, insurance company refuses to pay the money on the grounds that he should have taken the insurance in the name of the company, as the property belongs to the company. Now, in this, please understand one thing, that Insurance Act says that only people who have an interest in the property can take insurance. Here, the property belongs to the company. The member has no right over this property. Correct? So, how could M take the insurance in his own name? The court held that this is not a valid contract of insurance and insurance company is not liable to pay. So, the property of the company belongs to the company itself and the members have no rights over this company. Now, we have members have no right to take part in the day-to-day management of the company unless they are appointed as a director. So company ka management and ownership is separate. There is a difference between ownership and management. Though I am the owner, I may not be managing the company. It is managed by a separate body called the board of directors, singularly known as directors, together board of directors. However, these board of directors are actually appointed by the company's members. And the last one, because company is an artificial person, how will the company put its own signature? Company cannot put its signature. So because company is an artificial person, company cannot put its own signature. So there we use common seal. So these common seals are put on the document by the employee or officer of the company. But it's not mandatory for a company to have a common seal. So if a company does not have a common seal, in that case, it can be done. I mean, instead of common seal, we will have signature of 2 directors. But again, if the company has appointed a company secretary, then signature of company secretary is mandatory. So with this, we are done with the characteristics. Moving on to types of company. Before I go into the types of company, can I say every company is broadly classified into private and public, right? Every company, doesn't matter whatever, every company is either a private or a public company. Now, these companies can be divided into limited by shares, limited by guarantee, and unlimited liability company. What is limited liability? What is unlimited liability? Limited by shares. Limited by shares means, let us say I have purchased 100 rupees share, right? And I have paid rupees 60. So in future, in total, my liability is only 100 rupees into the number of shares that I own. But in total, put together, at any given point of time, that is my liability. Now, let us say I've already paid rupees 60. So, if I've already paid rupees 60, in future, the maximum liability that I can have is rupees 40. And when am I liable to pay this rupees 40? Whenever the company makes a call. This call can be made by the company during the course of the business or during winding up. If it is made during the course of the business, the board of directors make this call. If it is made during winding up, the official liquidators make this call. The next one is company limited by guarantee. Here, the members specify a certain amount. Let's say I say 5 lakh, you rich people, you say 10 lakh, someone else says 7 lakh. Tomorrow, if company goes into winding up, what is the maximum amount of liability I'll have? 5 lakh, 7 lakh, 10 lakh, whatever amount I have promised. You promised 10, I promised 5. Can I be held liable for 10? No. I am only liable for the amount I have promised. But this amount will be given only in the case of winding up. So when the company is already working, we don't pay this money. Now, when I say company limited by guarantee, these companies may either be limited by shares or limited with share capital or without share capital. So if it is limited by guarantee with share capital, there is double liability. I'm liable for the unpaid value also, plus I'm liable for the guarantee amount also. On the other hand, if it is without share capital, I am only liable for the guarantee amount. I am not liable for the unpaid value of the shares. When we talk about company limited by guarantee, what is the basic difference between limited by shares and limited by guarantee? Limited by shares will always have a share capital, whereas limited by guarantee may or may not have a share capital. Limited by shares, this liability to pay arises both in the course of business and in the winding up. Whereas limited by guarantee, I'm liable to pay only during winding up. Moving on to the next one, unlimited liability company. The liability of the member is unlimited. But here, there is a very, very crucial fact. Please understand, let us say, in case of partnership and here, what is the difference then? Let's say firm, partners, third party. Can the third party directly go and sue the partners? Yes, they can directly go and sue the partners. On the other hand, if I talk about unlimited liability company, company, members, and third party. Can the third party directly go and sue the members? No. The third party will only sue the company, and company in turn can sue the members, but the third party cannot directly sue the members. That means the liability of the member is unlimited, but towards the company and not towards the third party. Moving on to the next one, one person company. What do I mean by one person company? Obviously, which has only one person as its member. A few things are given under section 3. The name of the nominee is given in the memorandum. All that is given in section 3. But otherwise, everything is given in rules. What does the rules say? Who can be a member or a nominee? Only a natural person who is an Indian citizen, whether resident in India or otherwise. Now, this question, I don't know why people get, so that is why today in the writing session, the first question I've taken about this OPC only. People get so confused. No, natural person mandatory, Indian citizen mandatory, person resident in India not mandatory. So even if let's say you are an Indian citizen, now what do I mean by person resident in India? Who has stayed in India for 120 days during the preceding financial year. Be careful, during the preceding financial year. Ma'am, if person resident in India is not mandatory, the provision need not, it's not, I mean, I don't need the definition. Yes, I don't need the definition of person resident in India. But it is not important here. It is important when it comes to the incorporation part or when it comes to the director's part. Not in your syllabus, but later you will come to know about it, why that part is important. Now, when we talk about OPC, member has to be a natural person, member has to be an Indian citizen. However, member need not be a person resident in India. Member need not be a person resident in India. That means what? Natural person, yes. Indian citizen, yes. Person resident in India, no, not necessary. So an Indian citizen, Mr. A, he is, अच्छा Mr. Ram लेते हैं तो Indian citizen लगेगा हमको नाम से. Mr. Ram is an Indian citizen and he has stayed in India for 110 days in the preceding financial year. I want you to drop an answer. Can he start an OPC in India? Can he start an OPC in India? I want an answer from all of you. Can he start an OPC in India? The answer is yes. Is he a natural person? Yes. Is he an Indian citizen? Yes. Residency is not mandatory. So now I hope you are getting what kind of mistake I'm talking about that a student can make, right? So they will see 110 days. No, we don't need that. Indian citizenship is mandatory. Residency is not mandatory. So even if you have stayed for less than 120 days, can you still start an OPC in India? Yes or no? Yes. So, who is an Indian citizen, whether resident in India or otherwise, can incorporate or be a nominee of an OPC. Now, a few things about nominee. What is the whole purpose of nominee? Tomorrow, if anything happens to the member, the nominee will become the member. That means if the member dies or becomes unsound, whatever, incapacitated, then in that case, the nominee shall become the member of the company. Now, when we talk about nominee, We obviously, I just cannot put anyone's name. His written consent has to be taken. So we take a written consent from the nominee that he is willing to act as a nominee. His name appears in the memorandum. This written consent is filed with the registrar. Now, few things. Can a nominee withdraw his nomination? Yes. If he doesn't like, he can. Can the member change the nominee? Yes. How many companies can I be a member or a nominee in case of an OPC? I can be a member of one OPC, and at the same time I can be a nominee of one other OPC, but only one. I cannot be a nominee or member of more than one OPC. That means I can be a member of one OPC, and at the same time I can be a nominee of one other, but only one. Now imagine I am a nominee of another OPC and I already have an OPC. The member of the other OPC is Swaha. So I, being the nominee, I become the member. Now problem is I have become a member of two OPC now, whereas as per law I can be a member of only one. So here they say within 180 days I must fulfill the requirements of the act. We shouldn't write he must select one OPC. No, fulfill the requirements. Fulfill the requirements means what? Come back to one OPC. I must fulfill the requirements of the act within 180 days. Now tell me a few restrictions. A minor, can he be a member or a nominee? No. An OPC, the motive is always profit. So it cannot incorporate it at. That means the original incorporation, it cannot incorporate as or convert into, that is future conversion into an OPC. I'm so sorry, into a Section 8 company. The motive is always profit. And it cannot operate as an NBFC, including investment in any securities of any body corporate. That means it cannot be a non-banking financial company. Moving on to the next one, private company has a minimum paid up capital as may be prescribed. In Companies Act, whenever we use the word prescribed, who prescribes? The central government. As of today, nothing has been prescribed. So we will just write as may be prescribed. And by its articles. So the articles of every private company will have these three provisions. What? First, restricts the transferability of shares. I'm saying restricts. That means I can do subject to condition. I'm not saying you cannot do. I can do subject to condition. Second, limits the number of members to 200 except in the case of OPC. Why have we written except in the case of OPC? Because OPC is also a private company. Right? OPC is also a private company. So when I say private company, OPC is also a private company. Then third, now when we count this number of members of 200, joint holders are counted as single members. That means let's say Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C are joint holders. For the purpose of counting, they are three. But for the purpose of counting 200, we count them as one. Second, employees and ex-employees are not counted. Now, I said ex-employees are not counted. In exams also, you will write ex-employees are not counted, and it is wrong. You know why it is wrong. We cannot just write ex-employees. Ex-employees who acquired the shares while in employment. That's very important. And continue to hold them even after the employment ceases. That means what? Let's say I was an employee during this period. Shares and held during this period and continue to hold even after will not be counted. That means if I have acquired the shares here or if I have acquired the shares here, I will be counted. If I have acquired the shares while I was an employee and I continue to hold them even if after I stop being the employee, then I am not counted. And the third one, prohibits. Prohibits means you cannot do. Prohibits the invitation to the public to subscribe in the securities of any, to invite the public to subscribe in the securities of the company. That means it cannot offer, and I mean cannot offer securities to the public. Moving on to the next one, public company. When I say public company, what exactly is a public company, which is not a private company? First and foremost, which is not a private company, even though it sounds very funny. Okay? Even though it sounds very funny, it has a meaning. What it means is that when I talk about private, it is not a private company. That means the three restrictions do not apply here. Which are three restrictions, hai na, they do not apply here. That means shares are freely transferable. There is no limit on the number of members. It can easily take shares from the public. Has a minimum paid up capital. Nothing has been prescribed. Company which is a subsidiary. So basically in this point, what they are telling is, let us say This is public company, this is private company. Public company is the holding of private company. That means private company is subsidiary of the public company, correct? So if you are a subsidiary of a public company, you are a deemed public company. That means if you are a subsidiary of a public company, you're a deemed public company. What this means? Iska matlab, in the eyes of law, you will be treated as a public company. Oh, ma'am, iska matlab my articles will not. No, 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 wait. Your articles will have all the restrictions, right? Your articles will have all the restrictions. But Companies Act will apply as if you're a public company. So there are some laws which don't apply to a private company, right? There are some laws which don't apply to a private company. But if you are a deemed public company, those laws will apply to you. Even though you are a private company, because you're a deemed public company, those provisions will also apply to you. I hope it's clear to everyone. Moving on to the next one, small company. What is a small company which is not a private public company? That means even a small company is always a private company, right? That means even a small company is always a private company which has a paid up capital of 4 crores, right? Which has a paid up capital of 4 crores and turnover as per the PL of the preceding financial year up to 40 crores. That means the paid up capital does not exceed 4 crore, paid up turnover does not exceed 40 crores. You cannot only write turnover. Turnover as per PL of the immediately preceding financial year. That's very important. That's very crucial. वो लिखना है, right? That means you have to write, because when कब का turnover? Now the limit is paid up capital should not exceed 4 crore, turnover should not exceed 40 crores. Here they have made an amendment. They have changed this figure from 4 to 10 and 40 to 100. But guys, wait. For the Jan exam, you will write 4 and 40 crores only. If you are a student who's going to write in May, you will be referring to 10 and 100 crores. This clause shall not apply to holding and subsidiary company, company registered under Section 8, or companies governed by Special Act. That means even if they fulfill both the criteria, they will never get the status of a small company. When I say they will not get the status of a small company, what it means is they will not enjoy the privileges of a small company. Okay? Moving forward, holding, subsidiary, and associate. Holding, subsidiary, and associate. Holding company, very clear definition says the relation is interrelated. If I am your holding, you are my subsidiary automatically. And this is very specifically given in the definition of holding. But it does not really tell us how do we become holding subsidiary, right? So how exactly do you become? So let's go to the definition of subsidiary. You become a subsidiary if you fulfill any one of the two conditions. What? First, controls the composition of the board of directors. What is control the composition of the board of directors? The right to appoint or remove majority of the directors. So if my company has 8 directors and you appoint or remove 5, you are what? You are controlling the composition of the board of directors. Okay? Exercises or controls more than one half of the total voting power, either on its own or together with one or more of its subsidiaries. So we will just discuss a little on this part. If I'm holding more than 50% of your total voting power, total voting power means what? It means what? It means I'm talking about equity shares. But in the question, if they say preference shares carry voting rights, then please there you have to consider preference shares also, because they carry voting right. Otherwise, we will only consider what? Equity shares. Okay. Now, either on its own or together with one or more of its subsidiaries, it means what? Let's say X Limited and Y Limited. X Limited is the holding of Y Limited. Okay. X Limited is holding 23% of Z Limited. Y Limited is holding 32% of Z Limited. Now, standalone, X Limited is only holding 23, so not holding subsidiary. Standalone, Y Limited is only holding 32, not holding subsidiary. But if you see here, either at its own or together with one or more of its subsidiaries. That means what? Directly I'm holding 23. But can I say through my subsidiary, I am holding 32? Yes. So what is my total holding? My total holding is 55. My total holding is 55. So if my total holding is 55, am I holding subsidiary? Yes. So X Limited is holding of Z. But I cannot say Y Limited is holding of Z because it doesn't say together with its subsidiary and holding. It only says subsidiary. So can I say this? No, no. Is it clear? So if through my subsidiary I am holding something and together it makes it more than 50%, it becomes holding subsidiary. And it should not go beyond the layer specified. What is this? Let us say instead of X Limited holding 23, Y Limited, let's say Y Limited holds 55% of Z. Then can I say through Y, X is holding 55%, directly X is holding 0%, right? But through Y, it is holding 55. So can I say it is also again holding subsidiary? Yes, this is layers. Moving forward, however, shares held in fiduciary capacity shall not be considered. So what do I mean by shares held in fiduciary capacity shall not be considered? This applies for both associate and subsidiary. Shares held in fiduciary capacity shall not be considered. I repeat again, this applies for both holding and subsidiary. Okay? Now, let us say X Limited ka 52% shares are held by Mr. M. Mr. M appoints his son a nominee as a minor. Can you appoint a nominee, a minor as a nominee? Yes. No, ma'am. That is only in the OPC case you cannot. In other companies you can. But when I appoint a minor as a nominee, I have to name someone as a trustee. I have to name someone as a trustee. So what he does is he appoints Y Limited as a trustee. What he does, he appoints Y Limited as a trustee. So when he appoints Y Limited as a trustee, let us say M is Swaha. So when M is Swaha, the shares goes to whom? The shares goes to S, but S is a minor. Shares goes to Y Limited. Y Limited is now holding 52% shares of X. Is X Limited the subsidiary? And the answer is no. Here, Y Limited is not holding the shares in a personal capacity. Y Limited is holding the shares only as a, it is only holding the shares as a trustee. It is not holding the shares in its personal capacity, only as a trustee. Shares held as a trustee is not counted. So there is no holding subsidiary relation here. The next one is associate, when you have a significant influence over the other company. One thing very important, X Limited has a significant influence over Y Limited. Who is associate? Y Limited is the associate because I am controlling. How can I be the associate? The one who is being controlled is the associate. So who is the associate? Y Limited. Now when we talk about associate, basically what is significant influence? At least 20% of the total voting power or business decisions. So if I do a reading of this, what it means is if it is 20 to 50, it is associate company. If it is more than 50, it is holding company, right? With this, we are done with this. Moving forward, government and foreign company. What is government company? In which at least 51%, not less than 51% of the paid up share capital. See guys, very crucial. That day I had put up this, that on Instagram story where you had opted, so many had given wrong answer. Please understand, when it is more than 50%, the moment you become holding company. But for government company, minimum is what? 51%. In holding subsidiary, it is total voting power. In government company, it is total paid up capital. is held by central government, state government, or both of them together. But if you are a subsidiary of a government company, you also become a government company. So there are two ways you become a government company, where at least 51% of the paid up capital is held by state government or central government or both, or more than half of, sorry, more than half of the total voting power is held by a government company. So in either of the case, you become a government company. Next, what do I mean by a foreign company? What do I mean by a foreign company? A foreign company means a company incorporated outside India but has a place of business in India. Now, when I say place of business in India, it can be direct or through an agent. That means I can directly open an office or I can appoint an agent to do the work for me. And it can be what? Physical or electronic. So, for example, Amazon has an office in India, right? That's physical. Whereas on the other hand, if we talk about when we talk about this eBay or Alibaba, they don't have an office, so it's electronic mode. Guys, 1 second. Can we go forward? Yes. Now, Section 8 company. So, what exactly is a Section 8 company? The motive of this company is not to earn profit. So, they are non-profit companies. You know, when it comes to partnership, when it comes to LLP, the motive is always to earn profit. But when it comes to company, we can have a non-profit company. But an OPC can never be a non-profit company. Please remember that. OPC is always for profit. But we can have other companies not for profit, private or public, whatever. So what are they formed for? They are formed to promote sports, science, arts, religion, SARC. You remember? Sports, science, arts, religion, charity, commerce, technology, environment. The main objective, their objective is not to distribute dividend because their motive is not to earn profit. So they do not. It is not that they may if they want. They are not allowed to distribute dividend. And what do they do with the earnings? They reinvest the earnings into the business to promote the objects. Now, when we talk about a Section 8 company, the company will apply to the central government for a license. Once the license is issued, it need not. Please, this is need not. It's not cannot. I see people writing cannot. No, this is profit. This is profits, not surplus. Please don't change the words, right? So they need not use the word limited or private limited after their name. So generally, their names are like Chamber of Commerce, Corporation, Foundation. These are the kind of words they use in their name. Chamber, Corporation, Foundation. Like a Reliance Foundation, right? Chamber of Commerce, you've heard about them. And, generally a partnership firm cannot be a member of a company because it has no legal existence. But if you are a Section 8 company, even a partnership firm can become a member of your company. Even a partnership firm can be a member. Now, can a company alter its MOA or AOA? Yes, company can alter its MOA or AOA. But for alteration, they need the approval of the central government. Now, what happens if the company, let's say company declares dividend, company is not allowed to declare dividend, it is breaching its objects. If the company breaches its objects, or if the company acts fraudulently, or if the company the license is issued to the company, it can be issued subject to conditions. Company breaches the conditions, or company acts against public interest, right? Four things are there: acts fraudulently, acts against public interest, breaches its objects, breaches the conditions subject to which the license is issued. In any of the four cases, what will happen? The license will be cancelled. Once the license is cancelled, three things can happen. The company may be ordered to convert into a private or a public company. Once company is ordered to convert into a private or a public company, they have to add the word limited or private limited after their name, right? They have to add the word limited or private limited after their name, and they will inform the registrar who will make the changes in his register. Or they can be ordered to amalgamate with another Section 8 company. But understand, my company is in the promotion of science, yours is in the promotion of sports. We cannot amalgamate. No, it doesn't go hand in hand. So, with similar objects. Or they can also order for the winding up of the company. If in winding up, after paying off everything, if any surplus is left, in normal companies, that surplus belongs to the equity shareholders. But if you're a Section 8 company, that surplus does not belong to the equity shareholders. So this surplus will be transferred to Insolvency and Bankruptcy Fund under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So this is an act, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Under that, we have a fund. So this money will be transferred to that fund. Now see, converting into a private or a public company is a very, very normal thing. But when you amalgamate or wind up, the whole existence of the company is coming to an end. So in that case, before you do that, you have to, the government should be very sure that this is in the public interest, that this is the only option. Only then they should pass these orders. But before any order is passed, no, audi alteram partem, an opportunity of being heard should be given. With this, we are done with Section 8 company. We are only left with one more type of company, dormant company. What is dormant company? A company which is formed for a future project or to hold any assets, including intellectual property. And this company will not have any significant accounting transaction. That means when I've incorporated myself, at that time only, I know that I'm not going to do business right now. I will do business on a future date. Right now, I'm just holding an asset, or I'm incorporated to do business on a future date. So, they apply to the registrar that, look, I want to be a dormant company, right? They apply to the registrar that, look, I want to be a dormant company. And then registrar allows them to be a dormant company. And if on future date, when they want to start the business, they will again apply to the registrar that I want to become an active company. Registrar will remove the name from dormant and give them the status of an active company. What is significant accounting transactions? There are some expenses which is mandatory even if you're not doing any business. If you are making any expense which is mandatory, which you cannot avoid, it is not significant. But any expense other than what is not mandatory is a significant accounting transaction. If I have incorporated myself, I have to pay some fees to the registrar. Whether I do business or I don't do business, some fees to the registrar has to be paid. It's mandatory, it's not significant. If to fulfill the requirement of any act mandates the payment of anything. If any act says you are incorporated, whether you do business or not, you have to pay this money. Because that act mandates, I have to pay the money. So that is what? That is payment to fulfill the requirements of the act. This Companies Act or any other act. Is it choice? No, it is something that I have to do. And when I have to do something, it's not significant accounting transaction. Third, whenever a company is incorporated, the subscribers have to take up the shares of the company. It's mandatory for them to take up the shares. Right? It's mandatory. They have to take up the shares. So if I'm allotting them shares, not debentures, I'm not using the word securities. Debentures is not mandatory. Shares is mandatory. If I'm allotting shares to fulfill the requirement of the act, it is something that I have to do. Mandatory. So not a significant accounting transaction. On the other hand, if I allot shares to others, it is significant. And whether I do business or not, if I'm incorporated as a company, I must have an office. And if I have an office, there will be some rent I have to pay, some maintenance charges. So that is something that I cannot avoid. So it's not significant. Other than this four, everything else is a significant accounting transaction. What is an inactive company? So basically, how will you identify if after incorporation, a company is not... So let me first explain what is an inactive company. It does not do any business. Or since the past 2 financial years, it did not have any significant accounting transaction. That means other than this 4, no other expenses was made. Or in the past 2 financial years, so actually what happens? No, after the end of the financial year, once I lay down my financial statement and annual return at the meeting, annual general meeting, I have to file it with the registrar. Okay? I have to file it with the registrar. within 30 days for financial statement, within 60 days for annual return. If I fail to file for 2 consecutive years, you don't have to remember 30 days, 60 days. That's not there in your syllabus, just telling you. So if I fail to file it for 2 financial year, I become an inactive company. Now, how will I identify dormant or inactive? If I have been incorporated, I have been incorporated as an active company, but I'm not doing any business, then I'm an inactive company. Dormant company means I've been incorporated as a dormant company. Inactive company, I've been incorporated, and after incorporation, these things are happening. Then then the registrar will send me a notice that look, you're not doing any business, so I'm going to declare you as a what? Inactive company. Is it clear to all of you? Yes. So this is what we mean by an inactive company. Now we are done with types of company. Let's take a 2 minutes break before we continue. Okay, so coming back to the next part. So this is the second part of Companies Act. So I had thought it will take me comparatively longer, but one shot was good. So coming to the incorporation of the company, when we talk about incorporation of the company, section 7 actually tells us about the whole procedure of incorporation. And as per section 7, if I want to incorporate, I have to file an application in Spice Plus. What in this Spice Plus specified pro forma for incorporating companies electronically plus, I can make 4 applications. What is this 4 applications? First, application for incorporation. Second, application, first application for name. Second, application for incorporation. Third, appointment of directors. Fourth, allotment of den. So these are the 4 things that I can make an application for. The second one, with this Spice Plus, I have to file 3Ds. It is D cube, 1 document, 2 declarations, 3 details. What is that 1 document? Along with the Spice Plus, I have to file an MOA and a AOA, right? I have to file an MOA and a AOA. So this is my 1 document. Then 2 declarations. The first declaration will be given by, so whenever we incorporate, whether it's company, whether it's LLP, whenever we incorporate, we have to hire a professional who is going to guide us with the incorporation procedure, right? We have to hire a professional who will guide us with the incorporation procedure. So this CA, CS, CMA or advocate, anyone in practice can be appointed, not all of them. Insolvent ho jayega company banne ke pehle. So any one of them has to be appointed, and this person will give a declaration, and another declaration will be given by any director or secretary or manager. What declaration? That we have fulfilled the requirements of the act, that companies have fulfilled the requirement of the act. Whatever was required has been done. Now, the second declaration will come by every, now this is every director and subscriber. So let's say I have 7 subscribers, 3 directors. So 10 declarations will go. What first? Can I incorporate some other company also? Could I have been in have could I have been a part of some other companies incorporation also? Yes. So while I was incorporating some other company, I have not committed any what? I have not committed any offense. I am not guilty of any, ma'am, what offense? Like giving false information. So I'm giving a declaration that while I incorporated some other company, I have not committed any what offense. Second, I am not guilty of fraud or breach of duty in the management. That means while I was managing some other company, right? While I was managing some other company, I am not guilty of fraud or breach of duty. Third, whatever document I have filed, as per my knowledge, the document is clear. I mean, it's true and correct. Now, this is 2 declarations. So, 1 document, 2 declaration, and these are the 3 details. First detail is address for correspondence. Now, if I already have an address, I will give that address. I mean, if I have an office, I'll give that address. But if I don't have an office, because I can have office within 30 days of incorporation, right? So in that case, I will give some other address where the registrar can communicate with me. So I will give some other address where the registrar can communicate with me. So that address will be given. Second is details of subscribers and details of directors. What is details of subscribers? Name, surname, family name, address, occupation, photo ID. Also with that, SIN, corporate identity number, right? If a subscriber is a body corporate, then he will give a SIN, and also nationality, because even foreign citizens can be a part, foreign nationals can be a part of a company. Details of directors. What details of directors should I give? Same, name, surname, family name, address, occupation, photo ID. I repeat again, can a director be a body corporate? Never. Then it's like a vicious cycle. Company is a body corporate. To manage company, I appoint a director. Director is a body corporate. To appoint director, I appoint someone else. Ho gaya. Like it's like a loop then. So when I say details of directors, obviously it cannot have a SIN because a body corporate can never be a director. So here, what do we provide? We provide a DIN, director identification number. And the third detail is, can my director be a partner of some other firm? Yes. Can my director be be a shareholder of a company? Yes, it could be. So in that case, I have to give the what? The details of my director's interest in any other firm or body corporate. And along with that, I have to give the consent that he's agreeing to act as a director. My director will give a consent that he's agreeing to act as a director. All this will be filed with the registrar of the company of the state where my office will be situated, and he will issue a certificate of incorporation and allot a SIN. This certificate of incorporation is an evidence, not conclusive, it's just an evidence, okay? Is an evidence that the company has been incorporated. I hope till this it's clear to all of you. Now, what happens if the company is incorporated by giving false or incorrect information? What happens if the company is incorporated by giving false or incorrect information? So let us say before incorporation only we come to know that the information is false or incorrect. Then every person who signed the document, the incorporation document was signed, no? Every person who signed the incorporation document and who is aware as in he's aware that this mistake, I mean this information was wrong, will be liable under section 447. You remember section 447 is a section for fraud, right? If after incorporation I come to know that the information was false, then in that case, every person who has signed, whether it's promoter, director, subscribers, the manager, secretary, the professionals, anyone who has signed will be liable under section 447. So the basic difference between before and after incorporation is, before incorporation only people who are aware are liable. After incorporation, anyone, irrespective of whether aware or not, is liable. And the tribunal can pass any of the following orders against the company. What? First, It can pass orders for the management of the company. That is, it can appoint any person as a director, remove the existing directors, can say the existing directors will work as per my orders, whatever. Second, it can make the member's liability unlimited. That is, the liability of the member will be now unlimited. Third, it can order that the name, strike off the name of the company. This strike off is basically winding up without really winding up. Fourth, it can order the winding up of the company. And fifth, any other orders it deems fit. Right? As soon as the company is incorporated, a thin wheel called the corporate wheel comes between the company and the members. That means company and members are not liable for each other. But there are certain cases where this wheel is ignored and the company and member is taken as one. So let's understand what are the cases where the wheel is ignored. First, where the company is formed for protection of revenue. The name of the case was Sir Dinshaw Manikji Petit. There was another case, Sir the Jugilal versus Income Tax Commissioner, same case. So what happened was, because of payment of high tax, the person, he formed separate companies, transferred his investment to these companies. Two things happened. One, though, because the investment was divided, the profits got diluted and the tax was decreased. And second, because corporates were taxed lower, his tax was even low. Oh my god, the hell am I talking? His tax was even lower. The court held the only purpose that these companies were formed was to avoid the payment of revenue. The wheel was lifted. And when I say the wheel was lifted, that means what? The company was ordered to pay the real, the person was ordered to pay the real tax. Second, whether the company is a sham or a fraud. The name of the cases are Guilford Motor Company versus Horn and Jones versus Lipman. So basically, in Guilford Motor Company versus Horn, the employer makes a contract with his employee saying that after you quit my job, you cannot deal with my clients. After quitting the job, the employee formed a company and through this company started dealing with the clients. The court held the only purpose the company was formed was to deal with the clients of the employer. The wheel was lifted. And the court ordered the company not to deal with the clients of the employer. In Jones versus Lipman, the seller of the land had agreed to sell the land to the buyer, but later he did not want to sell it. So he made a company and sold the land to the company. The court lifted the wheel and said that the only purpose that this company was formed was to avoid the payment of, was to avoid the sale of land. The wheel was lifted and the company was, or the rather the seller was ordered to sell the land to the buyer. The next one, where the company is formed to avoid welfare legislations. So the name of the case was the workmen of Associate Rubber Industries Limited Bhavnagar versus the Associate Rubber Industries Limited Bhavnagar. If you look at this case, one thing is very evident. The case is between employer and employee. So what really happened in this case was the company was paying bonus and it was paying high bonus whenever required. But what happened was, because the company had huge profits, the company had made a lot of investments. And because they were earning a lot of income from these investments, the bonus was getting higher. So what the company did, they formed a subsidiary company and they transferred this investment to the subsidiary company. The company was not doing any business. It was only holding this, what? It was only holding this investment. The court held that the only purpose that this company was formed was to avoid the payment of higher bonus. The wheel was lifted. And when I say the wheel was lifted, the court ordered that the company should what? The court ordered that the company should pay higher bonus. The next one was this, in all of these cases, the purpose was wrong. But in the last case, there was no wrong motive, but still the wheel was lifted. To determine the true character of the company, the name of the case was Daimler Company Limited versus Continental Tire and Rubber Company Limited. So what really happened in this case was that this company was incorporated in England, but 90% of the shareholders were German. During World War, the company filed a case against its English debtors. So in the case, the court lifted the wheel and saw that 90%, generally what happens, I'm incorporated in England, I'm an English company. But because the situation was so grave here, because of the enmity here between the two countries, the wheel was lifted and the court saw that 90% of the shareholders were German. Because 90% of the shareholders were German, the court declared this company as enemy company. Right? The wheel was lifted and the court declared this company as enemy company. So with this, we are done with this part. Moving forward, guys, 1 second, I'll be back. So moving on to the memorandum of association. Memorandum means a memorandum as originally framed and altered from time to time. So basically, if I talk about memorandum, what exactly is memorandum? This definition does not tell us really anything, but it is the most important document. That is a charter of the company. Charter means it gives the reason of incorporation. It defines what are the powers of the company, right? It defines what are the powers of the company. Now, there are 6 clauses in the memorandum. If you remember, name clause, object clause, capital clause, liability clause, association clause, situation clause. The first is name. The name of every company will end with the words limited or private limited. The second is situation clause. That is the registered office clause. Here we don't give the address, but rather we give the name of the state where the office is situated. The third one is the liability clause, which defines the liability of the members. It's limited, unlimited. Fourth is capital clause, where we specify the total capital that the company can raise by the issue of shares, which is known as authorized capital. You just don't write authorized capital. Along with that, you actually give the division, number of shares and price per share. Then the next one is association clause. If a company, oh, I forgot object clause. Object clause comes after situation clause. Object clause tells us the purpose of the company, why the company has been incorporated, and any other purpose to attain the main purpose. And any other purpose to attain the main purpose. When we talk about the next one, this subscription association or subscription clause, the subscribers, the people who form the company, they give a declaration that we hereby declare that we are forming this company. We hereby declare that we are forming this company. So these are the 6 clauses. On the other hand, articles, again, the definition is same. Articles tells us about the internal management, right? Articles tells us about the internal management. When I say memorandum, memorandum tells us okay, someone has just messaged. I'll just get back to your question in a little while. Memorandum tells us what the company can do. Articles tells us how the company will do it, right? Memorandum will tell us company can issue shares. Articles will tell us what will be the other provisions, how we'll make the calls, can we forfeit the shares, can we buy back the shares, can we alter the share capital. All of this will be given where? In the articles. So memorandum tells us, memorandum defines the relation of the company to the outsiders. Articles defines the relation of the companies within the company. Now, this one thing, can I amend my articles or MOA or AOA? Can I amend it? Yes. Can I amend my articles? Yes. I need to pass a special resolution. So what is special resolution? Minimum 75% in favor. That means this is my articles and these are all the clauses in my articles. Can I amend the articles? Yes, but I need minimum consent of 75%, right? But let us say in my articles, I have mentioned that this clause can be altered only with 90% consent. I have mentioned in my articles that this clause can be altered only by 90% consent. So in this case, the rest of the articles will be altered. I repeat again, in this case, the rest of the articles will be altered. How? Only by a special resolution, but this clause will be altered only by 90% consent. This is known as entrenchment clause. 90% is not fixed. It can be 80 also, anything more. It can be 80 also, it can be 89 also, it can be 95 also, 99 also, 100 also, anything. But can it say we will alter it by passing 50% consent? No. Because law says minimum 75%, you can put something more but never less. So it can be more but never less. This is known as an entrenchment clause, and I can put this clause in two ways. Either when I'm forming the company, and when at the time of formation I make my articles, at that time only I can put it. Or second, I can put it as an amendment. That means at the time of incorporation, I did not put this clause. Later, I feel I need to add this clause. I can do it. That is an alteration, an amendment. And for alteration, I need special resolution. So if I'm a public company, I will pass a special resolution. But if a private company wants to amend its articles to add an entrenchment clause, it will need the consent of all the members. Okay, does it mean private company can alter the articles by consent of all? No. Alteration of articles happens by special resolution only, irrespective of whether you are a public or a private company. But if a private company wants to alter its articles to add an entrenchment clause, for that I need consent of all. Is it clear to everyone? Yes. Now moving forward to doctrine of ultra vires. Ultra means beyond, vires means powers. Not allowed to do something. Acha, before this girl, I think it's girl, whatever. Someone has asked me, the student has asked me this question. So let us just answer her question. So she's like, I mean, he, she, whatever. I have studied the other chapters. Is it okay if I leave Indian Contract Act? The Indian Contract Act is 36 marks ka chapter. Okay? I would never suggest leave it. And it's just today is 7th. Oh, I goofed up with the whole thing. I thought today is 6th. And I had made a video where I said I'll start from the 6th. It was completely my goof off. I don't know how I did it. But anyway, it's just the 6th of the 7th of December today. You still have ample of time to finish that chapter. And we will also be doing the revisions. Just watch the revisions, do the chapter. You'll be able to finish at least enough to write something in the exams. So I would never suggest you to leave Indian Contract Act. Now, ultra vires means what? You're not allowed to do it. A company rents a property. MOA does not say anything about renting. A company is into giving coaching. Okay? The company decides to open a zoo. Wow. It cannot. Why? Because MOA does not allow. If the company does anything which is outside the purview of its MOA, that is ultra vires and hence void. If it is within the powers, intra vires, it's valid. But if it is outside the powers, it's void. The concept was laid down in the case of Ashbury Railway Company versus Ritchie. Company agreed to give loan, whereas MOA did not allow. The contract was void. Now you would say, ma'am, how is Ritchie supposed to know? Like, should he go at night, open, break the windows? Ta-da, 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 no, 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 no. I told you, no such drama. How will Ritchie know? Ritchie will know because of constructive notice. So whenever you file a document with the registrar, it becomes a public document. Now you can go to the registrar's office, pay the fees and see the document. So it is, we always assume. Now let's say I tell you tomorrow evening again, same time I'll meet you at 6:30. Companies Act is done, tomorrow partnership. We'll do partnership. I say that. So I have given you a notice. This is real notice. But if I say, I will post it on my Instagram and Telegram channel, what time we'll meet tomorrow. So I will assume that you will watch it and come. So that's a constructive notice. So section 399 says that whenever a document is filed with the ROC, it becomes a public document. And if any document is a public document, that means every person dealing with the company will know about it. So company is not going to, hey Richie, did you read my document? No. Company will work on the assumption that you have read the document and only then you have come. So this is constructive notice, deemed notice. So the act says, so in this case, they laid down that if an agreement is void ab, if an agreement is ultra vires, it's void ab initio. Okay, fine, it's void ab initio. Richie says, okay, fine, give me damages. The court held neither of the parties can sue each other. Since it is ultra vires, we both cannot sue each other, right? Since it is ultra vires, we both cannot sue each other. Now, what happened was the director, MD of the company called everyone. He's like, we can do this. It's amazing. Yay, whoa. Everyone said, yes, yes, MD, do it. Still, it's not valid. You are not allowed to do it. You cannot ratify. Ma'am, I can never do it. No. You can first alter your MOA and then do it. But what you are trying to do is you are first trying to do it and then alter MOA. That is not allowed. You cannot go the other way around. So you can alter the MOA and do it, but you cannot do it and then try to alter. So the whole body also cannot ratify it. Can a shareholder sue the company for injunction? Yes. Even a single, even if I'm holding one share also, I can still go and sue the company for injunction. You're not allowed to do, you're doing it. I can stop you from doing it. The directors, now, if the act is ultra vires the directors but intra vires the company, the directors can take a loan, but only with the approval of the shareholders. So it is ultra not allowed by the directors, but it is allowed by the company with the consent of the shareholders. So if they take a loan without the consent of the shareholders can ratify it. Right? The shareholders can ratify it. Now the points I'm going to discuss in the May material, they have removed these points. So for the May students, these points you don't need to know. But in the Jan material, these points are there. When they remove no, they generally don't ask questions from those points. But since the points are there, I'll just do it with you. Let us say company has taken a loan which is ultra vires. That means the company is not allowed to take the loan. And the company has not used the money. The lender can sue the company to stop the company from using that money. By filing a case of injunction, the lender can stop the company from using this money. So if the company has taken any loan and the loan remains and the money remains unutilized, the lender can sue the company for injunction. That is, stop the company from using that money. You're not supposed to take a loan. You have taken a loan. Negative term. So I stop you from using that money. If the company has taken an ultra vires loan, I repeat again, if the company has taken an ultra vires loan, but this loan is utilized to pay a lawful debt. Let us say company has taken a loan of 5 lakh and this loan is ultra vires. But company, out of this 5 lakh, company used 3 lakh to pay a lawful debt. Right? Company used 3 lakh to pay a lawful debt. So that 3 lakh can be recovered. That means what? What happens here is company has paid to the creditor and this was the lender of this money. Since the loan was ultra vires, it is deemed that the lender has only paid the creditor. So the lender steps into the shoes of the debtor and he can recover that money from the company. Can he recover the whole of the 5 lakh or he can recover only 3 lakh? Tell me all of you in the message. Can he recover the whole 5 lakh or 3 lakh? I'm waiting for everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Tell me, can he recover 5 lakh or 3 lakh? Thank you so much. But you will also remember it. You need to just read it again and again. Tell me. How much can the company recover? 5 lakhs or 3 lakhs? So since only 5 lakh was ultra vires, 3 lakhs was attributable, right? 3 lakhs was attributable to a lawful debt. So he can recover how much? 3 lakhs. I hope it's clear to all of you. Yes? Doctrine of indoor management. So I see a lot of people telling me, ma'am, I'm so confused with doctrine of indoor management and doctrine of ultra wires. Where to use what? A very, very simple trick I'm telling you to remember. Okay? I'm telling you a very, very simple trick to remember this. A company is not allowed to do ultra wires. Company is allowed to do subject to approvals intra wires, right? I repeat again, in a very very one liner thing, if a company is not allowed to do something, what is it? It is ultra wires. If the company is allowed to do something provided approval, subject to approval, it is what? It is indoor management. Let us say you, this boy, you are not allowed to date. Your parents have prohibited. You cannot go on dates. If you go on a date, it is what? Ultra wires. Your parents have told you you can go on a date subject to our approval. We should approve the girl, time, place, then you can go. Now you go on a date without getting any approval, right? The girl is like, did you get your approval of your parents? He's like, yeah, I got it. Don't make fun of me. Now, he did not get approval. Is the girl required to go and check with his parents? Sir, did you give the approval? Is it okay if we go? No. She will work on the assumption that approval was given. She will work on the assumption that approval was given. In the first case, when he was prohibited, he cannot do it. In the second case, when it is about the internal approval, I'm not liable. I will work on the assumption approval was given. So I don't have to check the internal management. So that is indoor management. I hope this actually helps, because a lot of people, when I had put that story of this and that, there were so many. This was one of the question which had the maximum wrong answers. So I hope this actually, helps you to understand it. Anyway, what it says is that if a company is allowed to do something subject to some internal approvals, an outsider does not have to go and check the internal approvals. That's not my job. It is not my job to go and check the internal approvals. I don't have to go and check the internal approvals. I will work on the assumption that the approval was taken. And if there was any discrepancy in the approvals, if they had not taken the approvals, the company is liable, I am not liable. So this basically protects the outsiders against the company. That means outsiders are safe, right? Outsiders are safe. This concept was laid down in the case of Royal British Bank versus Turkwind. So a bank was allowed to issue bonds only if approval of shareholders was taken. The bank did not take the approval of the shareholders. And they issued the bonds. Later they refused to pay, saying that we never took the approval of the shareholders. Now that's something internal to you. How does it matter to me? You did not take the approvals. I'm not liable. As an outsider, I'm safe. Any irregularity in your approval is not my concern. But because of this no, a lot of people started misusing it. Right? A lot of people started misusing it. So in some cases, the court laid down that even you cannot claim relief in indoor management. First, when you know there is something wrong, you already know approval was never taken. Can you act on that faith? I am not liable because I don't know. You already know. So when you already know, how can you claim relief? Second is negligence. The company's accountant comes and tells you, I'll sell you the property of the company. Arey, where is your buddhi? How can this person sell you? He's just an accountant. He would not have authority. If you agree to buy from him, giving him money, company is not liable. It's your fault. Yo, I don't know MOA. Leave me this time. Next time, I will know. What? It is your duty to know the law, the MOA. You cannot claim any relief here. The last one, known forgery. Remember, Sina Bano, right? Now, see, when something is forged, the third party is equally ignorant. When something is forged, the third party is equally ignorant. But when something is forged, you cannot claim any relief from the company because forgery is a nullity, right? But yes, the act does give a right to the third party that in case of forgery, you can go and file a case against the person who has done the forgery against you. The last part, share is a share in the share is a share in the share capital of the company and includes stock. Stock is nothing but a bundle of shares. When I say shares, I can classify it into two heads: preference shares and equity shares. What is equity shares? Which is not preference. What is preference? They get preference in payment of dividend. That means when the company is paying dividend, it will first pay dividend to the preference shareholders and only then to the equity shareholders. And what is equity and what is the second preference? They get preference in winding up, repayment and winding up. That means after paying the creditors, the company will first pay the preference shareholders and only then it will pay the equity shareholders, right? Now, what are the different types of capitals? Nominal capital, that is the total capital that we can raise by the issue of shares. So let us say company ka authorized capital is 10 crores divided into 1 crore. This 1 crore is its authorized capital, right? 10 crores is its authorized capital. Out of this 1 crore, it's not necessary company will issue all the shares. Let's say it issued 1,01,000 shares. That becomes the issued capital. Now, it's not mandatory will get subscription for all. So out of this 1,01,000, they got a subscription for 1 lakh shares. So this 1 lakh shares is what? Subscribed capital, right? 1 lakh shares at rupees 10. Let us say out of this, the company called rupees 6 and rupees 4 is uncalled. So rupees 6 becomes the called up capital, rupees 4 is the uncalled capital. Out of this rupees 6, that means 6 lakhs was payable. 5,95,000 has been paid, but 5,000 was not paid. 5,95,000 is the paid up capital, and the 5,000 is what calls in arrears. With this, we are done with Companies Act. So I had actually thought we'll take 2 days to finish it, but we finished it in 1 day only. So tomorrow I will do at 6:30. I'll do the one shot of partnership. So I'll see you all tomorrow at 6:30. Till then, keep studying, happy learning, and stay motivated. Thank you so much.